Well. Welcome back to the podcast, The Honest Pod. You are here listening to The Honest Pod. I don't know where we find you. I always wonder, where are people when they're listening to this? Walking? Are they in their car? Do you wake up listening to podcasts? I'm always so interested. I listen to podcasts when I'm driving really far and when I'm walking. I hate being interrupted. So it's like, do I have enough time to listen to this podcast? I don't like doing like the catch me halfway through. I don't like that. So wherever we find you, welcome to the Honest Pod. You are in part 3 of a 4-part series on how our story impacts our emotions. We're talking about that today. And I was having quite the chuckle with you, Cathy, before we got on. You actually made me laugh, tears in my eyes, which made me think of the question, what is something that you have done that you were like, immediately no, like immediately this was a bad choice. Immediately, you know this. And it made me think of it because of what you did. When did you do that? What did you do earlier? Was it this week?
Last night.
Oh, it's so recent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So,
this is from the skier, folks. This is from the skier.
Oh God, no. See, and so I went skiing on Sunday, and I was not in good enough shape to really do it, and so I keep being like, okay, I'll just keep choosing to go to classes and try to work out, because I know that I'm not going to go consistently, but I'm like, if I just go every time there's the possibility of going, maybe at some point it will add up. It's a lie.
Yeah, that seems logical, but
I don't care. I don't care, because I'm done. I'm 40. I turned 45 on Thursday, and I've just come to realize that me and like exercise and the gym, we're always just going to be ambivalent about each other, and we're never going to be in a good relationship, and that's okay. So last night, I have a friend, because I'm a very social being, and the only reason I go is when someone else says, "Hey, do you want to go do this?" And so I now have enough friends. Right. Because I won't do it on my own. Because I hate it, but I like people. And we were going to go have dinner afterwards, and I thought that's a good idea. Right. So she texted me and said, there's a 5:30 class, let's go. I'm like, great. And we show up, and I don't know what kind of class it is. Turns out it's called mat Pilates.
Yeah. Okay. That seems easy. So it's like, you'd think it's like yoga. Like, oh, this is going to be like a nice yoga class.
You're laying down on the floor. I don't know. You're on a mat. So we get in there, and within 10 minutes, I am sweat is dripping down, and I'm like breathing heavy. And there are 2 of us in this class. And this woman teaching this class is just like, so when there's a lot of people in a class, when you tap out, it's like not a big deal. Right.
Right.
Because it's like, there are 15 other people doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if I don't do it, it's not a big deal. Like, you can kind of disappear into the background. When there are 2 of you, she's like, oh, well, it's okay. You can just go into child's pose. And I'm like, yeah. What's true about Pilates, which I don't do Pilates, some of you do, and that's awesome. They have you do these like little tiny movements that and then she's like, just pulse. It's like a 2-centimeter movement of the back of your leg, and it is excruciating. And
someone's taking a medieval sword and shoving it through the back of your hamstring muscle.
And they're like, just pulse. And I'm like,
pulse.
No.
What you're going to be feeling right now is your muscle separating from your bone. It's fine.
Totally. Yeah. And I am not in good enough shape for this. And I have never moved those muscles before, ever in my lifetime, not to mention isolated them. And I'm tapping out, and I'm just laying, all of a sudden she's like, child's pose. I'm like, by child's pose, do you mean just laying on the mat on my face? Because that's what I'm going to do now.
Did you stay the whole time?
Yes, ma'am. But minute by minute. Well, no, that's right. I was not present. I was fleeing in my own mind. No, I was staring at the clock, like, how many 60 seconds. I'm like, and I'm swearing under my breath. And this lovely woman is teaching it. My friend is right next to me, and she's just killing it because she does this all the time. And I'm like, I do not belong here. Someone just take me out of my misery.
When are we getting chips and salsa?
I mean, honestly, it's the only reason I'm there. I'm like,
here's the thing, is that what gets me about this story is the fact that you're basically having a private Pilates class.
Right.
And that is going to be immediately no for me. Like if I
No.
walk in and there's two people, I'm going to look at my friend and go, I am not equipped for this, because here's the deal. And this is where maybe we're different, but I cannot fail. So I would have been doing the poses till the point in which I died. Like I will not give in. So she would have had to resuscitate my dead, lifeless body, because I will have pushed myself to the brink of all of my muscles have now separated from my bones. And I'm just laying here, but I'm still trying to be in freaking tree pose or whatever you're in.
I know.
That
No.
is like I can't with two people. With 20 people, oh, it's fine. Like I'll be in the back row. It's no big deal. I can, but two people,
No.
no, there's no way.
Look, I am the same way, and I'm telling you, my body just gave out. It was like
You
not a
died.
choice. I all of a sudden it was like I couldn't move my leg anymore in that position, and it was just like I tapped out. Like I was like I it's no longer moving.
You're
And at that
just
point,
laying there like
you're
a
like on
slug.
your force. Yeah, and it's like I'm like flinging my foot. Like, because if you tell me I could do it, I'm
We're
gonna
hot.
try.
I
No,
don't know
I mean,
about you guys,
honestly,
but we're hot. I
it's
took a bar class one time. One time I took a bar class. It was the most terrible thing I've ever taken in my life. And I went with a friend, and basically she was you in this scenario. And halfway through it, she's just laid down. That was her only defense. She was laid down on her stomach. And I am like, I have a medicine ball between my legs, two rubber bands, one rubber band around my thighs and one rubber band around my ankle. And I'm on my stomach. And she's like, she wanted me to scorpion basically the medicine ball to my head. The ball popped out. It was a nightmare. I look over at my friend. I'm like, what are you doing? And she just looked at me like kind of side-eyed, and she said, this is terrible. Like, don't talk to me. She just laid there. Like it was her only defense. And I'm like, you're a terrible friend. You've left me here to finish this. The irony of all of it is I took so many videos about it when I got in the car and explained it so much, and I tagged them in it, that I ended up winning a month of Pilates because I
oh my
posted on Instagram and I won the Instagram challenge. Never used it. I was like, no,
no,
you guys didn't listen to the video. I was completely saying this is literal hell. Like if you don't know Jesus as your personal savior, you need to know him now, or you live in a forever bar class. That
no.
is actual hell on earth.
I do. I've been doing this other body pump class, and let me just. So this gym that I go to is
Body
right
pump.
next to
The
body
name
pump.
alone. That's
Yes.
gonna be there. The only time I'm pumping my body is when I am going to get a pretty for sure pleasure out of it. I'm just gonna be straight up honest with you. There is
No, here's the
class
deal
I'm
with the body
taking.
pump though. No, look, it's different. So my gym is right next to an old folks home, like a retirement community. And so on Saturday
Catch me
morning,
there.
all the women come over and some of the men, and we all do body pump together. And these are my people. Like
Oh,
these
you do body
are
pump
my
with the senior citizens?
That is correct. That is what I do.
Yeah, it's like the field trip for the senior citizen day to get their bodies moving, and you're like, this is where I'm at. These are my people.
Yeah. And I mean, it is hard. And I look at those ladies and I'm like, you know what? If you can do it, so can I, Connie. And so we're going to do this.
And
And
Connie's
I'm going
like,
to
well,
get
you better be able to do it because I'm 85 and you're 45.
totally. I'm like 2 pounds, 500
Body
times,
pumping.
like 2 pound weights is what I use.
Honestly, that sounds like delightful. I am down with that one. I'm just trying to keep a little bit of muscle mass going. I'm here for this. This is the truth about all of us. We all know where our limits are. And your limit is, I'm down for the senior citizen stretch body pump. Like
That's correct.
That's where I'm at. So don't mistake what body pump really means. It's senior citizen day at my gym.
Yes, right. And I love it. I settle up. I mean, literally, there's a woman named Connie that we talk, and I'm right up next to her on a Saturday morning.
Connie and Esther. There's got to be an Esther in the class.
And then I go sit in the sauna for 30 minutes and avoid coming home to my family because that's what I want to do. So it's my Saturday.
Well, if we want to blend in freeze or fawn, somewhere in here we can make this work. I'm
We
just
can.
proud of you for going to the gym. That's all. I just want to give you a public props to your Pilates experience. And, I'm still walking. Talked about
Yep.
that. So,
Yep.
we're doing the best we can. Did I go through the drive-thru at McDonald's today? You better believe I did. I had a lot going on, and here we are. And I felt guilty and shame the whole time that I ate it in my car because I didn't want to see it when I came home.
Why?
And then my
Oh,
husband saw
no.
my husband saw the cup. He was like, "Hey, you got McDonald's? Did you just get the drink?" And I was like, no. He said, "Oh, was that the dollar soda?" And I said, "I don't know how much it was." He goes, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, because I bought other things with it."
No,
He goes,
there's no
"God,
shame.
what did you buy from
No,
McDonald's,
there's
Karrie?
nothing
Gross."
more
I'm like,
delicious than like a quarter pounder.
it's
There's no
just
shame
so
in that.
bad. But here I am. I got a lot going on. Okay. So here we are. And that's
No,
just where we're at.
we're in 2024. We no longer shame our choices, I think.
I just feel like there should be a little bit of shame around McDonald's. I feel like if we really are honest with ourselves, we
it's
should
not the
have a
best
little bit
thing
of a check in our
for
spirit when
your
you're eating chicken that's pink. Like there's something that we should look at that goes, I don't want to shame you, but come on, you know better. Like
I know.
it's 2024. You know what's in that.
I don't know. Well, let's
It
talk
doesn't
about
mold.
look, but well, I know those pictures are terrifying. Okay, so let's. I think we should turn it because
Turn
this
it.
is great. This
Help
is good
us.
fodder for what are we doing? Fight, flight. Oh, freeze.
Freeze and fawn.
Freeze and fawn.
So recap,
just
what have
to
we been
recap.
even talking about? Help everyone, because I'm out of pocket right now.
Well, aren't we both? Like this is the last thing I do before I go on vacation, and can't you tell?
You got in one Pilates class for your bathing suit. You know what? I should probably do some Pilates. I'm going to be in a bathing suit for
Totally,
10 days.
as if it's
going
going to
to
do
one class
anything.
where you sweat.
I'm like, well, totally. Oh God, I know. This is the madness of it all, Lord. Yeah. Well, so what we're talking about is, is what happens when we have situations that trigger us, situations that bring about high emotions or intense emotions. And often, and those can be lots of things. We can bring on high amounts of joy and delight and laughter. And like, those are all big emotions too. But what we're looking at is kind of the fear, like what happens when we actually connect to something that either surprises us or we have emotions that are big compared to maybe the situation that we're in.
Right.
And that comes from a part of our brain called the amygdala, and the amygdala is the part that is the most basic survival mechanism of any animal. And it's the part of us that makes split-second decisions to decide if we're safe or if we're not safe, and what to do in order to get safe again. It's the basic part of it. And there are 4 things that happen to us when our amygdala gets activated, and it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I like to think of those in hierarchy, right? And all of those are based on a split-second decision that when something is threatening to you, you make a decision on what is your best option in order to keep you safe. And so we talked about last week, the first thing that you look at is, can I fight them? Can I overpower them? Is it even a threat? Or am I an even match? And if you are an even match, then fighting is a really good way to protect yourself, right? Running, fleeing is the second one. Like, I can't overpower you, but I can outrun you. I can leave the situation. I can peace out. And we do that in lots of different ways. We do that physically. We can do that emotionally. It's a superpower that we can say, look, I'm not going to let you hurt me, so I'm just going to leave the building. So the third thing is freeze. And freeze is like the deer in the headlight. Have you ever come upon a deer, where they freeze, or like squirrel, where you get there in a car and all of a sudden, they stare at you and you stare at them, and then it's like, then they go left and you go left and you go, and you're like, I am going to hit you. Like, come back to your body and your mind.
Go.
Get out
of my way.
Right. Like, I don't want to hit you, please. Right. And so there's a freeze response where it's like you just kind of shut down and you don't know what to do. You're frozen and you can't make any headway. And then the last one is fawn, and fawn is basically like, let me become pleasing in order to get to make me look less threatening, so that maybe you won't hurt me.
Hmm.
Also, very helpful coping mechanism. And I think, so we talked about last week is that according to our stories, we'll determine which one of these we utilize the most and in what order.
So that's
And
my
so,
question before we
mhm,
continue on, because you said, and this is an interesting thing to me, that you kind of see it as a hierarchy thing.
mhm,
And I guess I've never looked at it through that lens. I've always kind of looked at it to, you favor one that, and I'm probably wrong here. So this is really a genuine question of like, you favor one that is most easily like accessible to you and that you feel more comfortable with, I guess. I don't know.
mhm,
But
mhm.
but what you're saying is like, for me, fight, it was the one that I could do, but that's because that's the one we all kind of choose first. Is that what you're saying? So like not every
I mean,
like Mario would say that he's definitely like a freezer. Like
mhm,
he kind of freezes and then he fawns. But
mhm,
he's not fighting. Like he's not like that's never his initial response. But maybe it was
mhm.
when he was younger. I don't know.
Well, and I think this is where stories. There are some things where we overlay onto stories and say, this is kind of what's normal, and it's never 100%.
Right. Okay.
So, as what's true with everything is, you want to look at your own story, and nothing fits 100%, but it should make you curious.
Mm.
And so for you with fight, the curiosity is, well, that there's something about your family structure where that was a legitimate, that matched both what you felt you could do based on your personality, or,
Okay.
the story that you grew up with, but also the family that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
So when you fought, it brought connection with your dad, and it made your mom kind of fawn into the background and
Mm-hmm.
disappear. Well, that's
Yes.
very effective.
Right. Right.
If to fawn with your mom would have meant kind of matching her, and you both, it wouldn't have worked as well. Like, it's not as effective.
No.
And so, the idea of hierarchy is, wish I had done a little research before this, because I think it's actually a thing that they're finding, but it's also seen in nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Right.
if a gazelle could fight a lion, they would fight it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So then that
But
would
they
be
can't.
true. Like if a kid is in a home, their first, when something dangerous comes to them, what I think I hear you saying is instinctually, where we are assessing within seconds, milliseconds, can I fight this person? Like,
Mhm,
and the truth is like, for whatever you believe about yourself or whatever's happened in your story, you're going like, no, like that's not an option. Okay.
mhm,
Can I get out of here? No, I'm 7. I can't leave this house. Okay, fine. Like, or whatever Flea would look, I'm
mhm,
going to go to my room or whatever.
mhm,
But so
mhm.
what you're saying is that there's an assessment that goes through really quickly, and then you kind of land on the one that seems to get the response you're needing
Right.
the most quickly.
Yeah,
Am I accurately hearing that right?
I think so. And if we get
Uh-huh.
5 million emails of people saying you're wrong,
No one ever
fine.
emails because I
Oh,
always
okay.
say, guys, just don't email. I just I'm like Adam Young when it comes to those emails. I'm like, delete.
Delete, delete.
No,
Yeah.
I want to hear what you guys have to say. I do,
No,
but I think
uh,
this is a good conversation to think about because a
it
lot of
it's
people
a
want to
great
put themselves
conversation.
in a box.
Right.
Because I always flee. Well, do you? I think there's some situations where you don't always flee.
Right. And you shift, 'cause I also think if you fleed a lot when you were a kid, now as an adult, and again, I'm postulating, like, I don't know this for sure, but my
Right.
guess, my instinct says that, then when you're in trauma, or you're in a fear situation as an adult, you may be able to fight, but
Right.
you're so locked into your own fear response, which is, no, I flee.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. And so even part of our own growth is to be able to remind ourselves, and it's not, and again, the hope is that you get out of this amygdalic response, that you actually level back up to a different part of your brain, back to your prefrontal cortex, your hippocampus, and you actually elevate your thinking so that you're like, no, I'm okay. Now, how do I actually want to respond? Right.
Mhm.
But often our instincts around what our options are also we have to kind of work through that as well in order to become more holistic and healed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, should we talk about freeze?
Yeah, let's talk about freeze and fawn, because last week we talked about flight and fight.
And
So I'd
fight. I
love
know
to
all the
hear
F's.
ba, 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 which was awesome last week because I had like dentistry done. So it was like flight, please. That's awesome. So anyway, yeah, I would love to hear just a little bit about the freeze and the fawn
Yeah.
from your perspective.
So and there's a lot of good research on freeze right now, because freeze is coming up in a lot of different ways. There are a lot of things that I've learned over the years where I've gone, oh, I just thought that was a weird thing about me, but that's actually my freeze response.
Mm.
So let me give you an example. So last summer, usually once a year, my husband takes my kids and they go away camping or do something altogether, like backpacking or something, I either can't do or don't want to do or whatever. And it's an awesome opportunity for me to be alone in the house. And it's so rare for me to be alone in the house. I'm excited. I'm like looking forward to it. I mean, I love my kids. I love my husband. But my gosh, to be alone in my own
Sure.
home is
Lovely.
awesome.
Yeah.
And so I get psyched. I think about all of the projects I want to do. And like, I could sit outside. I could go to the hot tub. I could bob up, and sure enough, like, let's say they leave on a Friday night. I'm like, well, I'll just give myself the night to like hang out and watch Netflix and like do whatever. And all of a sudden I'll be on the couch until like 2 a.m, binge watching something. And then I'm like, I have to go to bed. Like I can feel myself kind of shutting down and almost getting sucked into the couch. And then I'm like, well, tomorrow I'll do something interesting. Like tomorrow I'll go out in the garden. I'll do this, and I'll wake up, and then like I'll be like, well, I'm just drinking my coffee, so I'll turn on the TV again. And then all of a sudden it's like 2 p.m, and I cannot move.
God, I relate to this.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Did I
I just
freeze?
yes, right? And what I'm starting to learn is that there's something about that moment where all these options, there's this pressure, there's a sense, but then when my body actually drops from the cortisol, from the pressure of being a mom, being a wife, like all of the energy that my family brings to me that keeps me going, when I drop from that, I actually go into a freeze response.
Wow.
I know. And so I started to notice it. Like, and last time I kind of, it had happened enough where I had anticipated it. And so I texted some friends and said, look, I am stuck. And it's very easy. It would be really easy for me to just let this whole weekend fly past and never
Get off the couch.
and never get off the couch. Like I was literally having like Chipotle bring me food,
Hell yeah.
like, and I was like, well, who's going to bring me food next? Like, and that was the extent of what I was willing to do. Like I was barely getting up to go to the bathroom. Like it was a state. And again, there was something of exhaustion. There's something of burnout, but burnout is also kind of a freeze response, right? It's a sense of all of a sudden when everything else drops, my adrenaline drops, I am frozen.
This is not how most people would define freeze.
Right.
I think they wouldn't think of it like this.
Right. And I think it's helpful because if
Very
you
helpful.
see this pattern in your life, chances are this is showing up in other ways too. And people who have a freeze response often use adrenaline and pressure and stress to keep them elevated so they never have to deal with the freeze, deal with the drop.
Oof.
Right. And so it's an interesting thing. So, it's same with like if I have an afternoon. Once you start to recognize like this is actually something that is a part of me and a part of where I shut down, part of where I drop off, part of where I just dissociate. And, it's the same thing that will happen at 10 o'clock at night where like finally the kids are in bed and I'll sit there and I'll scroll through Instagram for an hour. That's a freeze response.
Is freeze the same as, how would you define, this is fascinating to me because I notice when I travel a lot like you do. And when I come back, like I just was gone for 2 days doing this women's thing, and it was delightful. It was really fun. It was great. but it was a lot of energy. And I could tell like, and I don't think I'm as extroverted as I thought I was. I think I actually don't, I think people can drain me if it's a lot. And it was really lovely. But when I come back, I had all these things I had to do work wise because I've been off. And I'm finding like that anytime there's a pocket, I just want to sit on the TV. I just want to like watch TV. I just want to like sit. I want to literally like do nothing. And I have no energy to eat well. I have
Mm-hmm.
no energy. I'm just like, I don't care what I mean, I went to the McDonald's and I like, so in that, that's not, is freezing the same as numbing, like a numbing technique? Is that what you're doing in freeze is numbing?
It's connected, right? And again, like there are nuanced differences between the two when we're talking about like a full-fledged freeze, but I think we notice this is something that's often misunderstood in us, in that like our freezing or our scrolling or, you know, all of a sudden watching 6 hours of TV is actually more out of like a fear and a frozenness than it is even of like, I just need to not feel. It's
Mm.
like it's true that we're not wanting to feel, you know, but it's like we don't even know how to get ourselves out of it. We're we're
Yeah.
frozen, and then you can't do active rest. And so this often happens with people who are, you know, high energy, high octane folks who then get to the end of themselves and then they just drop.
Yeah.
Right? And the dropping is like, what you really need is to take a walk, to make some delicious food, to do active rest. Where by the time I get done with my cycle of like drive, I just drop off the cliff, and then I'm frozen and I can't do anything that would actually help me recover.
Oh my God. This is so
Right?
relatable.
Oh gosh. I mean, maybe this is just a podcast for us, but
Well, what's the difference between freezing then? And I hear the difference between numbing and freezing.
mhm,
Like one is like, I don't want to feel any emotion at all. And it's not
mhm.
necessarily that I can't feel emotion. It's just, I have nothing left to do,
Mhm,
to do any, even that activity, the active rest of like making something. I'm like, bro, like, I just
mhm.
don't even have that in me. Even though I want to do that in my head, I want to do that, but I'm like, ugh. But what's the difference then between the freezing and the fleeing?
Mhm.
Like, am I just leaving? Like so I'm not leaving. What would it look like for me to leave as opposed to freeze?
I think freeze, and again, gosh,
We're just
this is where
talking. We're just
we're just
talking.
sorry. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like wanting to do all these caveats. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
We're not trying to be, we're just having
I'm
a conversation, guys.
I'm
We
not a
do have
neuroscience.
some smarts,
We
but we're
do.
definitely not,
This isn't my expertise, but I do talk about this. So it's also it's bringing me to more questions, but it's also making a lot of sense to me. So this is how I think about it in my own body. Is that fleeing is like you're still with but you're going inside, or you're going away with you. Freezing
Mm,
is like your insides are stuck,
got it. Yes.
right?
Makes
Like
sense.
you're like, I can't. And it's actually harder. I think freeze is harder to recover from than fleeing or fighting, because it's such a like kind of an internal response. And
Mm.
there's no drive. So like when you flee, you feel safe again because you've gotten out of the face of danger. You've
Even if that
left it.
means you've gone inward, like
Right.
I've found some safety inside myself. So I
Right.
feel a sense of a felt sense of safety, even if I'm just inside myself. But you're right. In freeze, there's not I feel
It-
recovered or I feel safe. I just feel stuck. I just
You
feel
just
like I'm
feel
in a
stuck.
loop. I'm just like in a
Right.
loop.
Yes. Yes. And
Mm.
and so there's this great book. I think it's called Stressed Out, or maybe Completing the Stress Cycle or something like that. It's written by
Hmm.
two female doctors. It's a great book. But they talk about, you know, when you watch a good, like part of the issue that they're seeing in current culture is that what we're doing is we're always at the top of our stress cycle, and we're never actually completing it to tell ourselves that we're safe again. So when a gazelle sees a lion and starts to run, the gazelle knows definitively if they've won or not.
Hmm. Right.
Like they're either dead
Dead. Yeah.
or they escaped, right?
Right.
And so then the gazelle, what you'll see in nature is the gazelle shakes. So all of the adrenaline, all
Yes.
the cortisol, everything that's built up in their body that helps them survive and gives them the chemicals that they need to survive, they shake it off and
Mhm.
they release the chemicals. They know that they're safe, and then pretty quickly they're back to eating grass
You
with
can
their
actually
herd.
watch this. If you go on YouTube, you can actually watch this. It's really fascinating. It's the gazelle
It
and
is
it shakes it
fascinating.
off and stuff.
Yes. And so, and with fight, you kind of have a sense, did I win? Did I lose? Like,
Mhm.
there's kind of like there's a moment of climax and then decline. Like you have a
Mhm.
sense of, yep, I'm through the cycle. And that's not all the way true. But often with all these things, we have this low grade stress and anxiety and fear that's present with us all the time. And we're
Mm.
never completing the cycle.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're never actually getting out of this stress cycle. We're never getting out of the fear cycle. And then more and more is just piled on. And so when we think of like, oh, I just need a day off so I can veg out and watch TV, that numbs you, that freezes you, that kind of gets you, but you're still stuck. And so by the end of it, you don't actually feel the relief
Right.
of I've come out on the other side. And so then we're just perpetually flung back into the stress cycle over and over again, and these emotions that are kind of peaked all the time because we're always like anxious and ready for something else to happen to us, and and we're exhausted.
Mhm. It's like we're always gearing up, even if it's not bad. Like, even if I'm going into a speaking thing, which I love doing, my body's gearing up for that kind of adrenaline rush.
Right.
But it's never really like then when it comes down because the event's over,
Right.
there's something that needs to clear out in my body. Even though that was a good thing, it's still
Yes.
a cortisol rush. It's still an adrenaline rush. It's still an arousal structure. Like there's still stuff going on, but there's like no, like I haven't mastered the way. There's certain things that I know to do this, know what to do, but I haven't mastered the way of really getting, knowing, anticipating. This is what my body's going to want to do
Right.
to just kind of not have to deal with it, but that's not what it actually needs.
Right. And I think the more we understand what we do naturally because of our own trauma, and our stories, then as adults now we'll be able to say, anticipate it and say, okay,
Mm.
even though I'm desperate for space, like I'm going to Mexico on Monday with my husband, and we have literally spent the last week talking about preparing for how we're going to be together on this vacation, because we know we have a propensity to not do rest and vacation well.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know my body is just going to want to like go into freeze mode and, you know, watch a gazillion hours of TV, or, do whatever. And so I'm already anticipating, or we'll get into a fight and we'll sabotage it through the fight because that's his go-to. Or,
Mhm.
I've already been like, babe, if you end up being cranky on this thing, I need this vacation so badly, I will leave and get another hotel. Like, I can't tell you how seriously I'm taking this, right? And
Is it
that's not the best
okay?
approach, but I'm just like, I will enjoy this. You cannot ruin this for me. But we're anticipating. And so the more we can understand ourselves
Mm.
and understand where we don't necessarily handle our needs well, we don't understand what our bodies are telling us, we don't understand how our stories are intermixing with, normal fear factors, then the more we understand it. So now what I do is when I know that I have um, space and time, I've created this list, and
This is
it's
good. Tell me.
okay. So basically, what I've done when I'm in my right mind, when I'm in a healthy space, I think through what is helpful to me. Like what do I know actually helps my body recover? What is a good what are good things? Because I'll get an afternoon and then I'll freeze and I'm like, I don't know what to do, and it's like there are too many
Mhm.
options, and now I freeze and I won't do anything. So I've written out, like, this is a restaurant I can go to, and I can sit
Mm.
at the bar and have this really great steak salad that they serve, and it's really great, and it's in my neighborhood. And then I can walk this one path and then, go get a scone afterwards and a coffee. That's
Mm.
an option, right? And I literally have it written out of like, if I freeze, these are options.
Mhm.
I can take my dog on a walk. I can get in the hot tub. I can call these friends. I can, and it sounds so dumb, but
Mm-mm.
it's like this has saved my little frozen butt
Mm-hmm.
because, because part of what happens is that when I get into the freeze function and I just kind of like stop and can't move, I then have such self-contempt because, it's like then I look back on the whole day and I'm like,
Yeah.
what have I
Wasted
done?
it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm like, why? What is wrong with me? Like, am I just
Mm-hmm.
lazy? And, I could have done all these things and like I have all this paperwork and blah, 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 and then I just go into a shame cycle and spiral. And then, and that does even worse things for me to be able to recover.
Well, and then if you're anything like me, you don't have a choice. You're back in the next event or you're back in the next thing and you're like, all right, I'll deal with that later. But
Totally.
I love this idea of having a list. I think to add to that too is take a minute and write down like really how you feel when you are watching that TV show or when
Hmm.
you're stuck in whatever you're doing or you're just like sleeping a really long time. Like, like you are tired, but like you're taking it to the next level
Hmm.
of sleeping or whatever it is where you kind of feel stuck. And so I'm thinking through that right now of going like, if I go to food, a lot of times I will sit, I want to eat like really junky sugar, to be honest with you. I always know when I'm starting to, and I think this is a freeze response from what you're saying, is I'm just kind of in this cycle of my body has been so heightened. Like I
Hmm.
had a really good weekend and there's a lot of dopamine like
Hmm.
pumping through because I'm meeting people and it was really exciting and it was fun. It was very like draining for me, but I really enjoyed it. And I'm in all of this, like, especially when I speak, I'm like getting accolades and it's really wonderful. And we're having a great time and I'm working with the Holy Spirit and it's awesome. Then I come home and I'm like, oh, that was a lot. And I have other things I have to do. And I can't, and you could speak to this, but I know a lot of people are like this. I can't seem to recover or kind of get into a state of kind of a good rhythm. And so I just start eating a ton of sugar. Like,
Hmm.
and I notice like I am even after I eat something like the other day, I mostly ate sugar the whole day. I mean, I hardly even had like a real meal. I was just eating sugar.
Hmm.
And I'm like, man, is that I'm trying it's like my body's still trying to keep up with that adrenaline and that serotonin dopamine that I had going on from all of what I was experiencing. And I don't know how to bring it back into homeostasis in a way that's healthy,
Hmm.
like through a good walk or, going in the hot tub or going out with my husband or something, that would be easy conversation. And so is that kind of the same? Is that one of the now I know there's other parts of that, the numbing and, I'm going to use food to kind of escape and be a friend to me and a soother. And I hear I think I know all of that, but would that be a coupled in, would you say with a freeze response where I'm kind of
Yeah.
in that cycle?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Anytime that you just kind of feel stuck,
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever laid in bed and you've just been like, on a Saturday morning when I know I have space, I'm like, you know, news, Instagram, like all of a sudden like an hour
Totally.
and a half has gone by and I'm like, I feel stuck.
Terrible. Yeah.
And I have to literally be like, talk to myself like, get up.
Yeah. Yeah.
you you have to get up.
Right.
And so I think, we use lots of things to kind of help us cope and help us move and give ourselves the body chemicals. But if we're aware of what's going on, then we could be like, okay, so I'm reaching for sugar, which means I'm probably tapped out and I've had a overextension of my dopamine. And so I'm going to need to rebalance out and give myself a better balance of serotonin and dopamine
Hmm.
instead of just needing the hit, right? Because that's what you're
Yeah.
doing. You're just like, I need a hit.
Right.
Um, and the hit keeps us elevated when we're actually exhausted, when we're anxious, when things have happened that feel really intense. It'll keep us up. And
Hmm.
and oftentimes we keep ourselves up because we're afraid of the crash. And I think part of the
Right.
crash is that when we get down to the crash, we don't know what to do with ourselves because we're frozen.
So we're frozen. Right. So good. And I want to move on to fawn because I know
Yep.
I want to be able to talk about this. But one thing that I thought was fascinating when I was studying freeze responses, when we went to Rwanda and we were dealing with people that were the mass genocide and stuff that was there. And I was talking to one of the survivors and he was talking about how he was in this arena, and they were throwing like cocktail bombs and like all the stuff in there. And he's just explaining all of this. And, it's just like the horror, like what can he can't fight. He's not going to win. He can't flee. He's stuck in this like stadium thing and he can't flee. And I said, what do you remember? He goes, I remember there was this moment in which I heard screaming and then it just went silent. And I just laid there like I was preparing to die, but everything went really silent. And I was studying and I was like, well, his body went into a freeze response. And when I was studying it, I actually found out that that your pain receptors in the freeze mode begin to numb and deaden. And it's because your body, and I think this is why God, in his graciousness of the horror in which many of us have had to sit in, and I know this to be true even when there's been sexual abuse, and that the pain receptors begin to deaden so that the body doesn't feel the full weight of the pain that is about to come. And this happens in animals as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, like even in this fallen, broken world, like the way God designed our body, like he knew that there is tragedy and that but in his graciousness of preparation for death, when our body goes into freeze or it's in a state of massive harm, the body actually goes into the state where some of these pain receptors begin to deaden so that it doesn't have to feel the full weight of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think about like, well, if that's true and our body's going into a freeze response, even in something as simple as I'm just watching a lot of TV, like that stuckness there's a deadening response to the
Same.
overstimulation, of what is coming in. And it's actually not a bad thing. Your body is doing what it can do. The problem is that you aren't actually being attacked. Like you aren't actually. And so it like you said, it's to create going, I actually need to care for my body. I am not in a state where harm is going to come to me. I'm sitting on my couch, watching a TV, to be more simplistic. And yet your body is sensing, because we have not offered kindness to it and care to it coming out of these very elevated states, it's actually deadening in some way to just kind of lay there and not have to feel the full weight of what you've experienced or what you've been through. And yet to bring it back into homeostasis is to, like you said, finish the cycle and shake it out and walk and move. I just found that very fascinating.
It is
about the body.
And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we've talked a lot about what the freeze looks like here, kind of anecdotally as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And what it brings us to is that, the freeze. So what we're not talking about is our freeze response when we're actually in active trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're talking about the residual aspects that come to us that we maybe can see markers of in our adult life that are difficult. And we're trying to kind of lay those out a bit for folks to help.
Mm-hmm.
But but I think, when I talk about laying on the couch and watching shows as my freeze response, that's not, I'm doing that now because when I was a kid in real trauma, that's what my body did to survive.
Yes.
And so that mechanism was my only choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that's replaying itself for me as an adult, right? But what we haven't necessarily touched on is then to link that back to there's a reason why I had to choose that as a kid when I was in abusive situations.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my best go-to. And it did allow me to be distant from what was going on in me and allow my body to be touched in the way that I didn't want it to be touched, and to not feel the feelings of it, not feel, 'cause my body had to stay still.
Yes.
And so I think it's important to make that correlation because I think it's easy to be not flip. I don't think we're being flippant about it, but to look at it now, but I think it's important to link it and say, there's a reason you have that response now. And so when I'm overwhelmed in just normal day-to-day life, I'm also reaching back to patterns that were established when I was very young around trauma that I'm still working through as an adult. And their residual impact.
Yeah. I want to just stay here for a minute. I think next week we could just go into fawn because I don't want to
Mhm.
rush this because I think it's something like you said anecdotal in the sense of like I'm on the couch or whatever, but giving a few minutes to you work with a lot of clients, I work with a lot of clients, and they're in a perpetual cycle of freeze. Like
Mhm.
even though they're living their life, they're not living their life. I have a
Mhm.
client right now who she's just not living her life, even though she's showing up, she's parenting her kids and she's, with her husband and stuff. But there is a sense of her that is just so stuck. And she's terrified to show up emotionally. In fact, her words exactly are, well, I don't want to be weak.
Mhm.
And per her story, weakness is vulnerability, vulnerability equals harm and abuse. So there's this sense in her that I just and it's not like the difference between the fleeing where she's kind of going inward and finding safety within herself, it's not that. She's
Mhm.
just completely kind of numb, frozen, stuck in her life. And when we've brought the stories to life from her childhood, that is, of course, quote unquote, no big deal. Nothing really happened. And we bring the stories to light and we find out this very cold, very, very, very abusive. And because there was never a belt to her head or someone touched her body inappropriately, it was not that big of a deal. And yet this just to switch the story up for who's ever listening, but it's, the father is so cruel
Mhm.
with his words and his accusation to her. And she
Mhm.
has all this delight and comes bounding into a room with hope. And then he just assaults her with his words and degrades her. And to the point where she's terrified to even get up at night to go to the bathroom, like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
these things her body. And so I think it's important for what you're saying here to understand that there is a reason why you feel so stuck. And
Mhm.
it's not just because, yeah, you had, a busy weekend, like, and that you go to the couch or you just want to watch that TV show all the time and you can't break away from it. And you do love your kids, but you can't get off the couch. Like there's things going on that are linked, and I'd love to just spend a few moments here and then we'll wrap up and we'll go into fawn next week. But what are
Mhm.
some of your, like, for those that are listening, Cathy, and they're hearing this and they're going, that is me. That
Mhm.
is me. We know do story work and you got to go there and maybe meet with a therapist or whatever. But what are some of the things that you would even offer or say as something that they could begin to look at to even know like where they're at?
Mhm. Well, I think that all of our behavior, and we talk about this a lot, and I know you talk a lot about it as well, is it's adaptive behavior that we learn to survive whatever circumstances we're in the midst of in our
Mhm.
childhood.
Mhm.
And and like you said, God is incredibly gracious to give us an amygdala, to give us responses that will keep us alive. And so what we're always looking to do is to understand and bless and honor the adaptive behaviors that we needed as
Yes.
kids to survive when there was just very little choice.
Mhm.
And then as an adult, we start to see, and Brene, I think I've talked about, but Brene Brown says you armor up as a kid to survive, and then eventually the armor you're carrying is no longer serving you.
Right.
It's actually keeping you
Mhm.
from connection, from care, and it becomes maladaptive.
Mhm.
And so part of the work is to understand both, but you can't deal with your maladaptive behaviors unless you understand why they're present
Mm.
and have brought kindness and curiosity and generosity and care to those parts of you that made decisions and made neural pathways that are very difficult to change.
Yes.
Like those are there because that was your easiest option and the one that would keep you the safest the longest, and you
Mhm.
adapted. Well, now to undo those, to redo those takes so much kindness,
Mhm.
because it's also so easy for us to nail ourselves for like, God, why, what is wrong with me?
Just can't get off the freaking couch.
Right. Like, why am I yelling
So
at my kids all the
lazy.
time?
Yeah.
Totally. I
Mhm.
mean, I went to a women's retreat a couple weeks ago, and that was the number one thing. They were like, how I know that I shouldn't be doing this. I can't, like, why can't I stop?
per this whole conversation.
Right.
Like, why am I so angry? Why can't I stop being angry?
Why can't I stop? And I think part of it is you haven't been with yourself and the young parts of you that made decisions that they're still hiding in corners and frozen. I mean, when I was going through my biggest traumatic moment as a kiddo, my traumatic season, which was right after I'd been abused and we had moved. Anyways, it was a disaster. I was being bullied at school. Every day I would come home from school and go and get a thing of Pringles. We were talking about Pringles last week. Thing of Pringles and sit and watch TV at the afternoon cartoons. And I would do that from 3:00 when I got home to 5:30 when we ate dinner. And then my dad took over the TV to watch Wheel of Fortune at 7:00 and then Jeopardy at 7:30. Like that was our life. Right. And so that's how I soothed myself in the midst of highly traumatic moments, and to give myself a respite or something that felt like it could hold me. And for me, it was the couch, it was TV, and it was Pringles. Well, those are neural pathways that got created in the midst of intense amount of trauma, very little support from the adults in my life. And that creates and now I'm dealing with the impact of that later. For me to be able to be kind to myself in the midst of all of that, I need to have a tremendous amount of understanding and compassion for that little girl.
And when you do that, does that, because I think about that was not my response. Like when people ask, Dan, I remember sitting with Dan and he was like, Karrie, your anger was actually your courage trying to get the help. It was when, everything in my life needed to be elevated, like drugs and parties and dancing in clubs and just constant, and even fights with my dad, like all of that to keep me feeling this sense of I'm not dead. Like we're alive here, because everything felt so dead and so dark and so secretive. And so that adrenaline kept me alive. And I see that my crave for that in so many areas. But, and I think that you would agree with this, but since I've been doing this work, since you've been doing this work, like, does the brain begin to change? Are we able to then go, I actually don't need a hit of sugar, or I don't need a hit, or I can realize more quickly what I'm doing and be able to make some adjustments because of the work that we've done.
So what neuroscientists and people, there are two contributing factors to health and being able to actually grow. One is crafting a more accurate biographical narrative. So actually putting the pieces back together to say, this is actually what happened, because our brains, our bodies know what happened. Our brains don't want to see it. And so when we reconnect those things, integration actually changes us. It changes our neurons, changes our capacity. So that's the first thing. The second one that they've identified is the capacity to pause. And so it's just really simple. It's when you realize I'm having a reaction, there's something going on, but I'm going to take a minute and consider what's actually happening here. What am I actually feeling? How do I want to respond? What's the best way to respond? And it doesn't have to be, you take a 30-minute break. It can be 30 seconds. The difference between an impulsive reaction and a thoughtful response.
Yes.
And so if we can tend to our hearts and bring our bodies and say, okay, I am having a reaction, something's going on, let me take a moment and just take a breath. And then, and if we're doing the work of building this more accurate biographical narrative, and then we're introducing this idea of pause, both of those things can be exceedingly life-changing and change our brains.
So true. And I have seen it with the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with and the thousands of people that you've worked with. And it really does work. And here's the thing, in Proverbs 20, verse 5, the Bible says, and I think I might have said this earlier, but in a couple of other episodes, but a man's heart is like deep waters, but it takes a real man of understanding to draw it out. And we do not read accurately our stories. We have a story that is what has been more palatable for us to digest. But when we can sit in a trusted space, we know this neurologically as well, that when we can sit in a trusted space and we can allow someone or someone's to go down into those deeper waters and offer insight, because the enemy works in the deep places, these recessed stories where he's exploitive and he's an opportunist. So he sees a wounded part in your parent and how it's affecting you, and he exploits it and begins a narrative. Those narrative creates agreements create vows. And he does that. And it isn't until we go down into those deep waters where he's gone unnamed and unchallenged, where we can pull back the veil and wait a minute. I don't think that that was my fault. I don't think that it was, I thought it was my fault, but I was 5. And now my adult brain, coupled with some other faces that are loving and caring, can come and help tell a truer story. And because I believe the enemy works in the deep waters, but I also believe that's where Jesus works. Unfortunately, the church is set up to stop kind of in your private life or the behavior modifications, like let's deal with that and we'll get better. And we see an epidemic that's not actually working, that the church is actually not caring in the deeper waters. They're going to behavior modification when God is actually a God of heart transformation. But that can't happen unless we go into those deeper waters. And what Cathy and I are trying to bring to you guys is an understanding of, you have a story that was shaped in deep waters, places that are not seen to you and probably not seen, and are not seen by others. And what we're often fixated on, and what I think the enemy wants us to actually fixate on is, yeah, stop your drugs. Great. Stop looking at porn. Great. Stop coveting your neighbor's wife, like whatever. Like, sure. Because he knows that how your body is made is that you just take one addiction away, you'll move to another one. You will move to another place to find soothing if you don't understand why you did drugs in the first place, why you need porn. Well, like how porn is soothing you, because all you are is just shameful about how every time you look at porn. I'm like, well, porn's not actually your problem. It's like, it's not. It's a problem. It's not your problem. And so that's where I'm like, I hope you guys are hearing that. We aren't just wanting you to like go into your stories so we could just like mess with your life. Like I believe that God is wanting us, and there's tons of scriptures about this, and we can watch God do this in different stories, that if he wanted behavior to change, Jesus would have done a lot of things differently. But instead, he sat with his people. He spoke about the truer story of what was happening with the woman at the well. He wasn't contented enough just to go, hey, I just want you to know I love you. Here's my gift for you. Here's eternal life. No, he was like, hey, go get your husband. She's like, crap, I'm caught. I don't have a husband. It's like, yeah, you don't have a husband. You have 5 husbands, and the one you're with right now, you're not married. It's like so savage. Like, you're like, Jesus, just tell her you love her. But the point being is that Jesus is like, no, I actually love you so much that I actually want to enter into the betrayal of how many men have actually been with your body. And I want me as a male who's not even supposed to be talking to you to let my body be a place of soothing and healing in the places that you have actually been caught or you've actually been wounded. And so we're going to talk next week about fawn, because I think that's a whole nother, I see this so much, especially in Christianity. I mean, like, let's talk about codependency. Let's talk about Christians are the most codependent people I've ever met. And because we misuse scripture and this people pleasing and all this stuff and burnout and all that. But I just want you guys to hear that the deep waters of your heart are very important to Jesus. Like he's with you sitting in front of the couch with your Pringles. And there is a time in which you were not able to see the story for what it is. It wasn't safe enough. But he is giving you invitation, whether it's working with Cathy or it's working with Freedom Movement or working with me or whatever, to say there are places where people will venture into the dark, the deep waters with you. They're not afraid, and name what needs to be named so that you can be free. I don't know, any last thoughts? It's just such a good conversation.
I know. No, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Hey, you're going to be on vacation
In an hour.
I love it. The one Pilates has made you bikini ready. Let's go.
Goodness.
Thank you so
Goodness.
much for taking the time. I love these conversations. I'm thinking about my own life right now and my own freeze responses. Fight is for sure my go-to, but man, do I really need to sit in this freeze idea. I think there's a lot to that. So thank you for that. I love you to the moon. We love all of you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. We can't wait to see you next week. Bye.